There are two accounts of Passover feast, and if you read them, I'm going to share just two of them. I'm going to read Matthew's account briefly, Matthew chapter 26, and then there's also Mark 14, but I'm reading Matthew 26, verses 1 through 5. And it came to pass when Yeshua had finished all these sayings, he said unto his disciples, ye know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover. I want you to remember, this is the feast of the Passover. And the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. Then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people unto the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and consulted that they might take Yeshua by subtlety and kill him. But they said, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. Now, I want you to understand that this was absolutely a feast. Here's the first problem with them trying to mimic or trying to institute something out of the Bible that they are not correctly representing. The Passover was a feast, what is known as the Lord's Supper. That was the last supper that Yeshua had with his disciples, and that was celebration of the Passover, which is also known as the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But it was an actual feast where they actually sat down and ate a huge meal. We'll get to the definition of feast in a minute, okay? But our key passage was 1 Corinthians chapter 11. We discussed the key verse, which is verse 20. Paul speaks to the church of Corinth regarding the heresies and divisions, and then he speaks to their attempt to take the Lord's Supper. This Lord's Supper was an actual feast. Paul scolds them even for the way which they attempt to mimic the Lord's Supper. There is no sharing, there is no love, and that was absolutely not what the Last Supper was about, not what their celebration of the Passover, Yeshua with his disciples, that was not what their celebration of the Passover was about. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, he tells them this, for one eateth and another is hungry. He's saying, this is foolishness. This is ridiculous. This should not happen. You're not coming here to eat the Lord's Supper. What was the original Passover? It was a feast. Matthew and Mark's account also verified that this was a feast, okay? Matthew 26:2 says, ye know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover. Remember I told you that was a key word? The feast of the Passover. What is a feast? It's a large meal, and it's typically one in celebration of something. So what was this large meal in celebration of? It was in celebration of the Passover. And what was the Passover? It was what was instituted way back in Egypt when the children of Israel had to follow the instructions of Yahweh. They put the blood on the side posts of their door and over the top of the doorpost to cover themselves and to protect themselves from the plague that was to come to Egypt to kill the firstborn man and beast, okay? So here's what Paul says to the church at Corinth in verse 20 of chapter 11. When ye come together, therefore, into one place, this is not to eat the Lord's Supper. I praise you not. You follow me? This is not to eat the Lord's Supper. He's saying this is not what this is about. This is not why you're coming together. Okay, and that's very clear to me. I don't think we need rocket science or any dictionaries to understand what he's saying, that when you come together, this is not, when you come together into one place, this is not to eat the Lord's Supper. That's not what this is about. And that's not what the gathering is for. So now let's pick up on verse 23 and let's move from there. And Paul says, for I have received of the Lord that which also I delivered unto you, that the Lord Jesus, the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread. I'm going to read it again because I want to read it right. This is what Paul says to the church of Corinth, starting in verse 23. For I have received of Yahweh that which also I delivered unto you, that the master Yeshua, the same night which he was betrayed, took bread. Now let's go over that one more time because I want to make sure I read it to you. For I have received. Now I've read some stuff where people were talking about, well, Paul was falsely saying that he received this from the master. Did he even have conversation or communication with the master? That's not what he's talking about here. This word received here is paralambano, which means to figuratively have learned or take hold of something. He learned, he said, for I have received, I have learned or taken hold of the information of Yahweh, that which also I delivered. This word delivered means paradidomi, meaning to surrender or give over. So he's saying, I have learned of this information and I'm giving it to you. I'm delivering it to you. That the master Yeshua, the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread. Okay, let's move on to verse 24. And when he had given thanks, he brake it and said, take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me. What happened here? When he had given thanks, he gave the Father thanks. He brake it. What was he doing? He was enacting what will be done to him. Now understand again, this is a feast, and this is Yeshua spending the last couple of hours with his disciples. What is he doing at this time after they have eaten their feast? He is taking the time to share with them out of love what's going to happen to him. He breaks the bread and he says, "Take, eat. This is my body, which is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me." He breaks it. He's enacting what will be done to him. Okay, what is to be done to him, I should say. You've seen a reenactment before, right? Well, Yeshua was acting it out before the act happened. Okay, so this is a pre-enactment. Okay, he was foretelling what was to happen to him. He says, "This is my body, which is broken." I love this verse. He didn't say will be broken. He didn't use the words will be. He didn't speak in future tense. He spoke in the present tense. He says, "This is my body, which is broken," as if he is already there. You know what this means to me? His mind is set and his heart is fixed on what he has to do, on what he has to do for those he loves. He has already accepted the responsibility that he and the Father have already decided was to be, so that we could be in the family of Yahweh, so that we could be in the family of God. He says, "This is my body, which is broken for you." His broken body. He said his body broken for, okay, on behalf of, or to the benefit of, okay? And it represents the ransom, enabling us to live. What does this word live mean? It's a chance to live after narrowly escaping death, because the wages of sin is death. So he says, my body is broken for, on behalf of, or to the benefit of you, as a ransom, enabling you to live. Okay, narrowly escaping death. I love that. The body here represents ransom. It's ransom from the prison of rituals. It's ransom from the old agreement. It's acceptance and belief in him. No more a need for the old agreement or the old covenant or the Old Testament, as it were, okay, which required a body of laws for the fulfillment of a debt. Okay, he becomes the body which is broken or sacrificed to restore us. It's a ransom that he pays the debt in full. He pays a debt for us in full. The ransom is paid in full. Now, what is a ransom? A ransom is a sum of money or other payment demanded or paid for the release of a prisoner. You and I, we were prisoners. The people of the Old Testament, they were prisoners to the old covenant, okay? We are no longer prisoners to the old covenant. There is a new agreement. What am I talking about? I'm not just talking about Old and New Testaments, Old and New Covenants, as in a book, two different sections of division. No, I'm talking about an agreement. We are not prisoners to the old agreement. Well, what is the old agreement? That you have to do all of these things. You have to do all of these laws and fulfill all of these laws in order to be accepted, okay? Now it's made simple. All right, and we'll get into that shortly. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but understand, a ransom is a sum of money or another payment that is demanded or paid for the release of a prisoner. Let's go to verse 25. After the same manner, also he took the cup when he had supped, saying, "This cup is the New Testament in my blood. This do ye as oft as ye drink in remembrance of me." As oft as ye drink it, in remembrance of me. Now let's read that again, and let's put in there what these things actually mean, because I want you to understand. I want you to separate the idea or the concept of communion, the convolution of communion, or this celebration of Passover that they call communion, or this celebration of the Lord's Supper that they try to call communion. I want you to separate that from this ritual that's been bombarding you. Okay, I want you to understand this is not about the ritual at all. So that's why I'm replacing these words with what they really mean, so that you can get an idea of what this is really talking about.